Hi, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Econ Major Explains. And today I'm going to be going over what it looks like to reimagine the GDP or gross domestic product. And before I go into that, I'd love some support. I've seen a lot of DMs about the recent course. Thank you so much to everybody that has signed up. I created a course in the description below where you can learn how to buy and sell websites, very similar to real estate. In real life, you can go and purchase websites, buying and selling them. You can create passive income, cash flow, things like that. So I created a quick course on that in the description below. Enter the coupon code INVEST25 to get 25% off. And without further ado, let's dive into this overview. Now, I've mentioned in the past on Econ Major Explains, this series that I've been doing, that there's so many questions. Like, you guys have reached out with so many questions about all of the different concepts I've covered in this. And I really try to keep it brief and broad, just because I don't like pigeonholing any of this content in one direction politically, or any sort of bias that I may have. I don't that I'm not aware of. I try to keep it very centered, very in the middle here. And Andrew Yang, the really brilliant economist, entrepreneur that's running for president in 2020, he was also an econ major, and that's why his policies have been so fascinating. And I enjoy going through his policies because they are very much out of a econ textbook in a way. Like, they're hybrid versions that are ideal scenarios that, if you were president as an econ major, they are what you would definitely want to put in place. And as you can see, I have the mustache for Movember. And let's go in through what GDP is and why it was created. So I have a couple articles pulled up here that I'm going to link in the description below that you guys will be able to check out. But the overall concept of GDP is it was created originally by a guy named William Petty, and it was a way for him to tax or attack landlords back in the day, because he was saying that it was unfair taxation. They were raising the rents, and this was in the 1600s was when it was first kind of created. The rough idea of a GDP came around was William Petty. And then along came Simon Kuznets, who I studied in school, actually. And that was in 1934 when he came up with, he actually wanted to measure welfare and like how the country was doing, the United States specifically, how they were doing in terms of limitations and things like that were happening within the country. And then along came 1944 with Bretton Woods. I hadn't heard of that guy until I was reading through these articles, and it became a main tool. So it went from 1934, in 10 years, from Simon to Bretton. So in 10 years, it shifted from basically a way of measuring welfare to the way that we measure all of our success as a country, in terms of production and income. And it's a really big jump there from 10 years, going from a sort of way of measuring the welfare to the key KPI, or key performance indicator, of how we're measuring the country. Now, this was 1944. So this was the last official time that the GDP has been iterated on. And this is something that Andrew Yang brings up. And we talk a lot about, like, the public sector, financial industries, and, assets and cash flow and stuff like that on this channel. But when we talk about GDP, that is basically, it's broken into three parts. We have the income of a country, we have the production of the country, and we have the expenditure, way of measuring. So a lot of these were created during the Industrial Revolution. And each one of those components, like income, production, and expenditures, are broken down into like smaller subset categories. But it's important to know that this was created a very, very long time ago. So much so that this was like when the first industrial revolution was going on, and you know all these warehouses and manufacturing facilities were popping up all over the United States, and people were, if you had a strong back, you could go and support your family by working in one of these assembly line warehouses and manufacturing plants. So it was like very, very clean cut. This is what we are producing as a country. These are the average incomes of people, and we were trying to figure out how we can measure our goods and services. Like, what are we doing all together to measure our goods and services? Now, if you note that currently we have an abundance of information. This is like the digital age of information where we are always inundated. If everybody's that watching this, you are always inundated by information on YouTube, on social media, on the internet in general. And just the idea of measuring this in a three-pronged approach is, it's simplified for sure. But with the amount of information that we have nowadays and the amount of knowledge of ourselves that we have, of like the human body and the mind and things like that, these types of GDP just are outdated. And it is very much in that age. It would make sense for that age in the 1940s, 1930s, where it was like, all right, we have these manufacturing facilities. This is how we need to measure our success. We're pushing out this much product. All of our employees and all of our workers are making this much, and we are able to produce these goods and services for the world and for our country and our citizens. And that was obvious. Like, you had your corporate profits, you had all of these things broken down into these buckets. So the first bucket, income, is the wages, salaries, and supplementary. I'm going through a list here that I have of how to break it down. So your income is your corporate profits, your interest and investment income, farmers' income, which is a big one, a big topic right now, income for non-farm unincorporated businesses, and your salaries and supplementary labor income. So just the idea, and also it's important to note that on most articles you will see that it's spelled in the Queen's English, like labor is spelled LABOUR instead of LABOR, and that is just because we're so dated with this. It's insane. And part of the reason that I've enjoyed reading about Andrew Yang and his policies is because he wants to add something like 20 or so points, methods of measure for GDP into what we're normally looking at as three different sections that are bifurcated out into smaller little subgroups, like your salaries and all of the little individual pieces like corporate profits and stuff like that. And his basic message is that humanity coming first, looking at GDP that way, you're going to have volunteerism. You're going to have affordability. You're going to have happiness and well-being and mental health, which is a huge topic right now that I think is one of the most important ones that a country can actually measure and try to measure it. I think that would be a huge breakthrough if we could manage to measure an entire country and the mental health there. So we have quality of life and life expectancy added there, which makes perfect sense. We have the environmental quality. We have affordability. So if people can get housing, we're making it affordable for them. Childhood success rates. We have underemployment. We have the consumer and student debt, which is like at an insane all-time high. And that, to me, should hit GDP directly. And we have work and civic engagement levels. Volunteerism, I love. We have infant mortality, which is a sad one, but that is something that is important to measure. Quality of infrastructure, access to education is a huge one because we've said on the channel many times before, it is equal opportunity, not equal outcome. Everyone should have equal opportunity, and that is a big one that we've mentioned here on the channel in the past, access to education. Marriage and divorce rates is a big one. Substance abuse and related deaths. National optimism, like how positive the sentiment of the nation, how positive are people, How do we think things are progressing? Do we think that the future is looking bright for us as a country? And then personal dynamism and economic mobility. So this dynamism word has come up quite a lot, and this is like the old saying of I'm going to pick up my stuff, move my family to the big city, and I'm going to make a living. I'm going to make a dynasty for my family. I'm going to make all of this money for my family, and we're going to have a life of abundance. And these all of these points that he says are so accurate and so spot on. I've never seen anything like this in an econ book, and it's so added on. Like there are the basic fundamentals. My phone was ringing there for a second. There are the basic fundamentals of everything that's going on right now with GDP production. So the estimated amount that we are going to produce as a country and the amount we are going to consume as a country. So that's the production approach, the income approach, wages, corporate profits, your interest on income, things like that, farmer income and non-farmer income. And then we have our expenditure. So we have the consumption, like how much we're consuming, how much of our goods and services are being consumed, our investment, our government spending, exports, imports, that's the expenditure category. So we have those three categories. So Yang wants to add on easily 20 categories to that. Those could even be subset categories. I could see them even fitting in under the production, like half of them. When I was going through and trying to move them into different buckets. And I think in terms of quality of infrastructure, access to education, the underemployment, the affordability, the quality of life, the happiness, I see those all being subsections underneath the production category. And it is effectively reimagining how we look at a society. We need to focus on the humans in the society, and the idea that Yang brings up multiple times is that if his wife is at home managing and raising children all on her own, and he's at work all day, her work is valued at zero, which in all aspects is wrong, because if a woman is raising a child and they go into the workforce, where is that calculated? It is not. It is not calculated at all. Whereas we're measuring the elasticity of demand for gasoline, and we're measuring the elasticity of demand of insulin and all of these other things, and all of these different aspects of the economy. But we're not measuring literally from an infant's birth to the workforce. We're just sort of measuring test scores and things like that, and not attributing any of the rationale behind a child's success to who is helping, who is actually the person that is employing all of those skills or deploying all of those skills to help that child out. And I really think that that's the best comparison that I've heard and that I've been thinking about is if you have a entry-level job position and a boss, that boss is given bonuses. That boss is, able to see the actual direct correlation of the efforts that are being pushed out by that person to help that entry level employee get a promotion, to help that entry level employee go to the next stage. And that copy and paste model for an infant to a mother just doesn't exist yet. And I feel like in the age of information where people can work from home, they can work from anywhere, mommy bloggers out there that are making six figures off of their blog, all the power to them. And their whole way of monetizing is just unique and different, and the world has never seen that before the internet. I mean, there were, of course, many examples of mothers getting jobs back when this GDP was started. But at the same time, the Organization of Economic Development isn't very well up to date. I believe they talk a lot about in the 1940s and 1960s when the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development was like super buzzing around, talking about how they were going to reform and change things around. But in terms of how things have played out, it's not as optimistic as I would have hoped. And I love the fact that Yang is bringing this up. He's talking about it. Just bringing it to the table is a huge win for everyone. It's important to know that, whether or not Yang wins, it's important for him to put this forward, talk about it, bring it to the table, and share with everyone. These are the issues. We have this broken system that's existed since steam was powering our manufacturing plants with hundreds of people on an assembly line. We're literally using that same method of measure when we have an abundance of technology now that is exponentially different than what we had back then. It needs to iterate. It needs to change. It needs to be modernized and jump into the future. So, real quick, running over all of the things that I think are brilliant that Yang is suggesting that he wants to change about the GDP is quality of life, happiness and well-being, environmental quality, affordability, childhood success rates, underemployment, income equality, consumer and student debt, work and civic engagement levels, volunteerism, a big one, infant mortality, quality of infrastructure, access to education, marriage and divorce rates, substance abuse and related deaths, national optimism, and personal dynamism and economic mobility. So the ability to move to places and work from where you choose to. And that is it for my overview of Yang's proposal and policy for changing GDP. My thoughts on it are that it is ripe for disruption and it needs to happen. I think based on my knowledge and my learnings of the economy has to adjust as these new innovations and technologies are available because of how quickly things progress. I mean, the Industrial Revolution grew rapidly, as we can see, and internet is making things grow rapidly, and we need to adjust and create a new way of measuring our production, our income, and our expenditures. So that is it for this episode of Econ Major Explains. If you guys like it, don't forget to slap a like. It really helps the channel. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more of these types of overviews and teardowns of different types of policies that are out there right now. Not necessarily one-sided, left or right, but very much focused on the overall economics that these could impact for the future. And that is it. I will see you guys on the next one. Don't forget to check out the course in the link description below. And don't forget to slap a like. And I will see you guys on the next episode.